Good day, everyone. In developing applications, developers have different ways, techniques, or preferences. Although we may be focused only to the things that we are used to, usually the choice of it depends on how comfortable you are in using it or how adaptable you are to try out any other approach. Today, I will discuss to you the different methods and approaches to application development. A lot of people are actually arguing about this. Which should be prioritized first? Is it the design or the functionality? Design is a plan or drawing produced to show the look and function of the application before it is made. So design is responsible for keeping the viewer's attention. Studies shows that a web page has just 3 seconds to make an impression before the viewer decides to stay or leave, and a page has only 12 seconds to meet the viewer's needs before they find someone else to help them. The design is what catches the viewer's eye and keeps them interested. A good design also sends a message to the viewer regarding the company's personality, quality, and the way they do business, while functionality is the range of operations that can be run on a computer or other electronic system. Functionality, on the other hand, is responsible for keeping the viewer. If a website is easy to navigate and the viewer can find the information they are looking for easily, the viewer is likely to visit the site often and experience all the website has to offer. Functionality is a great gauge at seeing how effective the company is at communicating their ideas to their clients or customers in face-to-face situations. So both parts play an important role, but if both are not used effectively, the website is useless. If a viewer does not find the website visually appealing or it hurts their eyes, they may not stay on the website long enough to see how easy it is to navigate. In the same aspect, someone may like the looks of the website but will not spend their time figuring out how to find the hidden information they need. So there are a lot of approaches in designing. So in today's industry of rapidly growing products, user experience design is becoming increasingly important. It's clear that design led companies outperform their competitors, and prototyping plays a vital role in the process of creating successful UX, but for many product teams, prototyping is still one of the most confusing parts of the UX design process. So we have here two approaches in designing: the low fidelity prototype and high fidelity prototype. You may read ISO standard in user experience design uploaded in our classroom. So prototypes don't necessarily look like final products. They can have different fidelity. The fidelity of a prototype refers to how it conveys the look and feel of the final product. So basically, its level of detail and realism. So fidelity can vary in the areas of visual design, content, interactivity, and there are many types of prototype ranging anywhere between the two extremes. And also, product teams choose a prototype's fidelity based on the goals of prototyping, completeness of the design, and available resources. So first, the most important role of low-fi prototypes is to check and test functionality rather than the visual appearance of the product. Low-fidelity prototyping is a quick and easy way to translate high-level design concepts into tangible and testable artifacts. And here are the basic characteristics of low-fidelity prototype. We have here the visual design, content, and interactivity. So in terms of visual design, only some of the visual attributes of the final product are presented, like shape of elements, basic visual hierarchy, the presentation of the images, and for the content, the only key elements of the content are included, so those information that are catchy to the viewers. And interactivity, the prototype can be simulated by a real human. So during a testing session, a particular person who is familiar with design acts as a computer and manually changes the design state in real time. So just like in the figure presented here. Interactivity can also be created from wireframes, also known as connected wireframes, or like this one, paper prototyping. It allows you to prototype a digital product interface without using a digital software. So the technique is based on creating handwritings of different screens that represent user interfaces of a product. While this is relatively simple technique, it can be useful when a product team needs to explore different ideas and refine designs quickly. Some benefits of this technique include leverage common design skills, so everyone can sketch, and this means that everyone can build paper prototypes. So even if you just know how to scribble, you can create now your own prototype. And also, it allows early testing. So testing the prototypes early lets product teams find big picture problems. And also, this may serve as support rapid experimentation. So different user interface elements can be drawn, cut out, copied to make extras, and then assembled on a new piece of paper. And lastly, it serves as a documentation. Unlike digital prototypes, paper prototypes can be used as a reference for future iterations. Another technique will be the wireframes. Wireframes is a visual representation of a product page that the designer can use to arrange page elements. So clickable wireframes are the simplest form of interactive prototype. So these are created by linking static wireframes together. So if you happen to know about Adobe XD, you may be able to use it here, or even if you use PowerPoint presentation or Keynote, you can also create clickable wireframes there. So just like paper prototypes, clickable wireframes often don't look like the finished product, but they do have one significant advantage over paper prototypes. They don't require a separate person to work as a facilitator during the testing session. So some benefits of this technique is that existing design deliverables can be reused. So during a particular phase of the design process, you'll have the wireframes or sketches that represent your product's design. In most cases, it is possible to use them to create a clickable flow. And another will be layouts can be easily changed, so designers can easily adapt wireframes based on user feedback and repeat the testing process. So with this tool, it might be easy to create or modify the prototype without spending a lot of extra time. High fidelity prototypes appear and function as similar as possible to the actual product that will ship. Teams usually create high-fi when they have a solid understanding of what they are going to build, and they need to either test it with real users or get final design approval from stakeholders. So the basic characteristic of this is that in visual design, so it is realistic and detailed design, since all interface elements, spacing, and graphics look like a real application or website. And with the content, designers use real or similar to the real content that you wanted. So the prototype includes most of the content that will appear in the final design. In interactivity, prototypes are highly realistic in their interactions. So some techniques are digital prototypes. So these are most common form of hi-fi prototyping. So this is a visual representation of a product page that the designer can use to arrange page elements. So nowadays, the variety of specialized software allows designers to create visually rich, powerful prototypes full of interactive effects and complex animation. So the difference of the clickable wireframes and digital prototypes is that the clickable wireframes can be just a flat design, while the digital prototype works as a working prototype or a working system. So the benefit of these includes optimization for devices. So specialized software allows designers to preview a prototype in a web browser or in a desktop or mobile device, or you may wanted to design it in a viewports, and then another will be less clarification during usability testing, since interactivity frees the designer from having to clarify concepts during testing, so this will allow the designer to focus on observation instead. So you choose a lot of tools for this one, like what I have mentioned earlier: Adobe XD, Proto.io, Mockups, PowerPoint, or Keynote, and any other tools that you are comfortable in using it. And the next technique would be the coded prototype. So this is a solution that is pretty close to the ready to release version of a prototype. So an example of such prototype would be a rich interactive sandbox that allows the test participants to explore a product's different features. So in this type of prototyping, you may also need to study or learn JavaScript, the behavioral aspect of the website, the CSS for the presentation, for beautification, and HTML for structural of the whole website or the whole page. So some benefits of this include the familiarity with the platform's constraint. So coding allows designers to understand the true capabilities and constraints of the platforms they're designing for. And also efficiency. So a coded prototype can be a good foundation for a fully functioning application. So assuming that you're not building a one-time throwaway prototype, what you build will provide the groundwork for the final product. So if it's possible to use prototype code in the final product, you'll save a huge amount of money and energy down the road. There are also approaches to development. And in this development, so we assume that we wanted to create a coded prototype or a high fidelity prototype. So here, you should be able to learn either PHP or Python, or you wanted to learn about some frameworks, and also to access your database, to manage it, you need to study SQL. So as you can see, PHP here is a server-side scripting language, so it is used for creating dynamic HTML content over the web. So later, we will differentiate which would you prefer to use. Is it PHP or Python, since both of these languages can be used in web development. So Python also is a high-level interpreted and object-oriented programming language. So usually Python have different library support, and in developing standalone programs and supporting scripting languages for various domains. As for the ease of use, Python is powerful, portable, open source, and it is relatively easy to learn and fun to use. So since it is somehow like a beginner-friendly programming language, while PHP, it is not used for general-purpose programming, and it is only used for creating dynamic web content with HTML. For the framework, so it is designed to support the development of web applications, so even including web services, web resources, and web APIs. So there are actually a lot of frameworks already that supports front-end development and back-end development, or even full-stack development. For the SQL, so since it is a domain-specific language used in programming, we might need this in order for us to design for managing data for our relational database management system. Python has grown in the field of CGI scripting, and in a few years it has become one of the most widely used programming language for web development. Whereas PHP, on the other hand, is actually new to web scripting. Though PHP is powerful programming language when it was originally released, so it would provide the same extensibility features just like Python. But in terms of learning, so actually Python is better than PHP in the long-term project, since the structures, the syntax are easy to remember. And for PHP, it has a low learning curve if you are still new with web development. It is easy to get started with PHP if you really wanted to pursue web development. So in terms of framework, so for Python compared to PHP, it has lower number of frameworks. So usually the popular ones are Django, Flask, and then for PHP, it has huge number of frameworks. So popular ones are Laravel, Slim. So later you will also know what are any other frameworks that support front-end development. And for the syntax, in Python, as what I have said, it is easy to remember, almost similar to human language. While in PHP, syntax is a little bit uncommon compared to the Python because it has a wide range of naming convention. As to the key features, Python has less design, number of code, and can be applied in a rapid deployment and dynamic typing. And for PHP, it is open source and easy deployment. And you can even deploy it in your local host or in a free hosting site. And language type, it is a general purpose programming language for Python, and for PHP, it is a web development programming language. And some popular fields for Python are machine learning, data science, AI, and automation tasks. And for the PHP, this is basically the best choice of language in web development. So here are some of the front-end frameworks which allows us to automate the overhead associated with common activities performed in web development. So we have SAS, Less, AngularJS, Bootstrap, Backbone.js, Node.js, MongoDB. So usually front-end frameworks works well with JS. And then for the backend developers, so we have here the top 10 frameworks for web application development. So we have Rails, Ruby on Rails, ASP, Laravel, Vue, Django, Express, Spring, Play, Angular, CodeIgniter. For the SQL, so SQL is a standard language for storing, manipulating, and retrieving data in databases. So although most database systems use SQL, most of them also have their own additional proprietary extensions that are usually only used on their system. Some common relational database management systems that use SQL are MySQL, SQL Server, MS Access, Oracle, Sybase, Informix, Postgres, SQLite, and any other database systems. And in summary, honestly, this sort of things is something you develop over time. You could try other people's approaches, but then find things that fall more into place if you create your own order and method of working. To me, functionality is one of the paramount things about a website. So both the programming and the design need to be created with that in mind. So if you design first, of course, you need to be thinking about how you're going to implement the programming. I do design first, but I'm always thinking about how the website is actually going to work, and I know exactly how that should be implemented by the time the design is done. If you are actually working with a client, so it's going to depend on what the project requirements are, and you may need to switch things up. And say the project requires responsive design or interactive design, you may find that creating the base code first and adding in design elements might be a better approach. Although we have to follow a methodology as a guide, so my best advice is that it's good to develop a process that works for you, but to also be flexible enough that if a project warrants a change in plans, you'll also be able to handle it.